Welcome to episode number 15 of the Farms in BC podcast. My name is Jay Cack, and today, Nav Sikon and I will be discussing the benefits of selling an agricultural property. When is the right time to do so, and why would you even want to? We're going to get into that and more. Stay tuned. All right, Nav. So now this topic is also very core to our business in the world of farming, agricultural, real estate. We got selling of agricultural properties and everything in relation to what are the benefits of selling and kind of how can we go forward on that, right? So obviously there's a few things we can consider. There's living, and I think that's probably the main concept, like housing and upsizing and downsizing a property. But what are your thoughts on selling an agricultural property?
There are a few factors. Usually, it's mostly the living. The living situation has changed, where the house might just be too big, or they might just be getting older and they want to downsize. What we've seen is there's also like if someone passed away, someone inherited the property, and then they will have to either sell it. We've also noticed is either the business has been running for a very long time and they want to either exit the business and they want to just retire, just simple as retiring.
Even on that point, I mean, I've seen it a lot of times where folks are maybe not interested in the way that business was done by the older generation, even though they want to do something tangent to that same business. Maybe it's dairy, and maybe they didn't want to continue the way that it was done before, and they want to do a completely new style, and maybe the generations just don't mingle the right way, right? So they want to downsize or upsize.
Or it could just be the opposite, where a farmer's been farming a certain way and doing things a certain way for so many years, and they might be in their mid 60s or late 60s, and they're saying, I don't want to do it this new way. I don't want to reinvest into more equipment or robotics or whatever it may be. There are always these factors that come in play. You have to understand, a lot of these people have owned their properties not for just 5 years. They've owned them for 20, 30 years, 40 years. And everybody does exit eventually, right? And we want to discuss today, what are those things that force people to sell or want people to sell, and what's the best method of moving forward when you make that decision that you do want to sell.
That's right. And I mean, it's sometimes the public seems to think that it's the realtors that are forcing these folks to sell, but the reality is these things do come up in life, and life happens.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, it's nice to have someone that's really specialized in that ballpark that really allows them to get the maximum amount that they're trying to get for, right?
Well, yeah. Aside from lifestyle and business, it's also their retirement.
Right.
So it's their big cash payout
to
enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Awesome. And then obviously, farming business, tax planning, estate sales. I guess we could start off with the business side of things. The next generation doesn't want to run the business anymore. How do you maximize the amount of money you're getting back for selling that existing business on the farm?
So what we've noticed is when someone is looking to retire out of their farm business, there's either those are the two factors. Either one, they've got a different method of doing the business and the business model has changed. It might even be as how you farm it to versus even how you're selling your crops, right? And as technology changes, a lot of people don't want to do the upkeep on that, or the varieties have changed and they don't want to reinvest into the newer varieties or newer plants or whatever it may be, or the latest technology as well, right? Another reason why we've seen farmers on the business side want to sell is that the next generation doesn't want to do it, which is fair enough. A next generation might have different goals, ambitions, their own dreams, and they grew up on a farm. They help their family run the farming business, and sometimes they just want change and want to do something very different, right? But when you do decide to sell your business, at the end of the day, it's a business. So you want to make sure you have so what we always say is when you're planning to sell your farming business, you should know 3 years before you're planning to exit, because you want to make sure your financials are strong. You make sure you show everything on the books, make sure you keep your costs low, and make sure you have management in place, because now you know that you're going to sell this. What are some factors that a buyer's looking for when they're buying a business? They're going to review your financials. They're going to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row for your contacts, for inventory, just how you're selling your product, and then having management in place that can roll over from the existing business to the buyer. Those three things, if you have those lined up before you sell your farming agricultural business, you will maximize your payout on your business, right? And where we've seen people make that mistake is they decide a year prior that they want to sell, and they don't have those things in place, and a buyer walks in and he's saying, this is too risky. Your financials aren't looking good, but they don't know that they've took a lot of money out personally, or they've funneled in other expenses just so that they can pay less taxes. That's right. Or they don't have management in place, and he was the individual that was running the business himself. So now
it's all up here, right?
It's all up here, and now the business is reliant on that one individual. What we've also seen is inventory, is when you have this big value of inventory, and we see it in nurseries a lot. Nurseries have sometimes on their land $1 million to $1.5 million in inventory. Now, how do you make sure you get the premium dollar? You're not going to get dollar for dollar. Do you get 75 cents on the dollar, or do you get 10 cents on the dollar on the inventory? Now, I think if you had good financials and you had management in place, I think you're going to get a better dollar for your inventory. Versus if you didn't have those in place, as someone that's going to walk in is not going to really value that inventory, because they're not going to know how to sell it at maximum value. Right? So that's the challenge that we see when people are selling businesses.
So basically what I'm hearing is preparation is key, really lining up your financials and having that forethought to just, have everything lined up properly before you execute.
Think about it. If you were buying a business, what would you want in place?
Yeah, you would want to see all that.
You would want to see, and if you saw that, guess what? There's more buyers to the table. There's more chances a buyer is going to buy the property and pay you premium dollar. It also goes well with the banks. When a buyer is going to come and buy your premium business, and you can show the bank that, hey, I need a loan for X, and they're going to say, well, do you have farming experience? Not so much, but guess what? There's management in place. Is this going to be a successful business? A bank they're taking a risk on you. Well, I've got 3 years financials.
That's perfect.
Right? And how are you going to sell your product, or what type of product are you selling? Well, look, we've got X amount of inventory that's on the books. Here's our wholesaler or our exit, our channels to sell. And that's the perfect formula for exiting out of a farm business.
And even when your business is doing phenomenally well, and maybe it's still on the rise, and you exit at a high point, you can actually get a very good return on that business at a high point, rather than when it's on a low point and the entire industry knows it's on a low point. You're not going to get the best return on that point, right? So if you have the foresight to, think ahead of time and find it.
But unfortunately, majority of businesses don't sell at the peak.
That's right.
It's because they see this amazing run and they say that we want to be a part of it. Yeah. So they're valuing the initial cash flow now versus the bigger payout.
Right.
So you can't have both.
Yeah, and it's also the buyer's perspective as well. We got to think about as well, right? If your business is on a downturn, they're less likely to invest in it. Whereas, if it's still growing,
and that's why they look at the 3-year average. Right. So if you've got year-over-year increase, you've got a better chance of maximizing that price. And then if you're on a decline, well, then those are red flags for a purchaser.
And another thing to really maybe emphasize is certain avenues that you may have not explored that the next buyer can explore. Yeah. Maybe you chose not to explore those due to limitations that you may have in your business, but you can really present those to the next buyer
as an added value.
Yeah. So they can see the potential of taking it over, and it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned that, because a lot of places where I've sold, it was, hey, this is how I've done it. This is all I've done. And I've had a good life and living off of it. And when we sold, we sold a very, we sold a vegetable or fruit store. Just don't want to name what it is right now, but they were so used to doing just selling fruits and vegetables, and they had their method. They were getting good cash flow. They were content and happy. And I remember the seller saying, this section here, we were going to set it up for greenhouses, and we were going to just sell nursery plants. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, like you've already got the clientele coming here buying all the fruits and vegetables. You've already established business for 15, 20 years. All you had to do is put up a greenhouse, buy the plants. You didn't even have to grow them. You just buy the plants at a wholesale price and you retail them here. And that added value would have been a huge on their bottom line. Plus, I've also noticed the seller, he was only open, I think it was 6 months out of the year. And he was only open 4 days a week. And you could see the revenue potential if he was open 7 days a week, longer hours, maybe not 6 months, but 10 months out of the year. Right. What was the potential like?
Just maybe someone that comes in, brings in their own expertise on top of what's already existing. That's a huge value add. Yeah. And you can definitely see a lot of sellers can take advantage of that as well, just proposing that, somebody of that caliber, of this kind of distinction, could bring it in, that experience, and it could elevate the business entirely to a new level, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So another selling point for sure. Now on the tax planning and generational wealth transfer side of things, I guess that's a huge topic. We have covered a little bit on the tax episode, but I think it's really good to mention again because it's very relevant to this selling side of things, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think anytime we go in to do a market evaluation for someone that's looking to sell, we do ask them why you're selling. That's the very first question. Second question is have you done any tax planning? There's chances are there's going to be a very large capital gain. Most of these people have bought these properties 20, 30 years ago. And the gains are anywhere from $2 million to $5 million. And if you do 25% on that, your tax bill is going to be anywhere from $500,000 to maybe $1.5 million. Yeah. Then does it make sense to sell, right? So we always try to explain to them, go talk to your accountant and figure out what you're going to get taxed on, and can you use any of the exemptions. There's the principal residence exemption. So 1 1/4 acre, and the house will be used as principal enjoyment and principal residence. Then you have your, if you've been farming, you'll get your $1 million exemption as well, right? So having this in place before you sell will allow you to know what you're going to net at the end of the day, versus going in blind and thinking you're going to get an X amount, but come out with a fat tax bill. Yeah. Right?
And I think that fear alone is enough to hinder a lot of people. But the reality is just be informed, right? Go get the right tax advice, and you'll might realize that everything is quite straightforward actually in your situation, is very accommodating to the next sale and moving on to the next stream that you have, right? So people actually don't even try to get that tested or checked out from the accountant for the fear of, it might cost too much or whatever the case is. Yeah. But that advice is extremely valuable. Yes. And at the very least, at least consult with us or something, right? Yeah. Something that's free or whatever the case is.
Well, the thing is, we give our advice based on the experiences our past clients have had. But everyone's individual circumstance is different based on how they filed. So it's not there's copy paste that it's equal to everyone. It's what you declared, how you filed, how much farming income did you have versus your total income. So your accountant will have to analyze that to see, do you trigger a lot of these exemptions?
And all we can really provide is awareness of these factors, right? At the end of the day, we can't really diagnose your specific situation.
Well, I had a situation where the capital gain was almost $6 million. Oh,
wow.
That was the gain on the property. They never farmed. The tax bill would have been close to $1.5 million. But they were going to allocate the funds to their next generation, to their children. So instead of selling, what they did is they put their kids on title. And they farmed it for another 3 years, And now each kid got $1 million exemption as well, and they tax sheltered everything. Yes, they couldn't sell it today, but they sold 4 years later. And they saved over $1.5 million.
Phenomenal difference. Yeah, huge. And that's the difference with the right advice, saving millions, right? So I guess estate sales, when you're forced to sell after a passing.
After a passing, what we've noticed is the biggest mistake that we see on estate sales is they will call their friend who's a realtor, that whoever inherited the property. And we've seen it a lot, actually, especially in the last 2 years, because a lot of the baby boomers, either they're passing, and we've noticed the kids are they're inheriting these properties. And what they're doing is they'll get a residential realtor to come and do the assessment, and they're actually selling it under market value. And that's why the estate sales are selling in less than a week or even days.
Right? They're not maximizing.
They're not maximizing at all. And I'm not saying that's at 100%. I've seen actually more in the last year that I've seen in a very long time of estate sales. And it's going to continue to happen. Either they used a relative to sell, or they just used a residential realtor that is not familiar with how to price these things, and they're looking for a quick sale. So one thing I would always advise is just don't interview one realtor. That's right. Interview 4 or 5 realtors. Bring who you thought you were going to use, and bring in some experts and specialists. Interview multiple people, right?
Absolutely. And no, estate sales is a really big one, because a lot of the times the children may not be able to easily buy each other out, or really come to an agreement where they can jointly own something of a large acreage, right? And perhaps it's just one large parcel, and they just don't have other parcels to kind of accommodate to each other. There's a lot of different variables there, and in that situation, it only makes sense to sell and then differentiate, right? So in these situations do occur, right? All the time. And that's just one factor. There's also divorce. There's also other things that come into play.
And we've dealt with a lot of them, right? And I think you have to be very sensitive to, especially when it's a probate sale, there's an executor. The executor has to do what's best for the interest of the other beneficiaries as well. So we can't, it's their job to make sure they get the maximum value, and then how those funds are allocated. Same thing with the divorce. Like when you bring in an agent to sell something, it's not how fast you sell it like a residential house. It's get the maximum value. Where I've seen a lot of sellers make this mistake is it's okay if it doesn't sell in a week. Like, I don't know why everyone is so adamant that it has to sell in the first week. Like, that's not the norm. That's not how you get maximum value. The maximum value is brought by doing marketing. These are niche products, and you have to spend a lot of money on marketing to bring the highest valued buyer.
And it's not just a property, it's a business that you're selling, and to portray the value of that business takes time. Right? And it takes due diligence for a buyer to really appropriately value something that is of this magnitude.
And I do understand, like, people do want the money right away, but a month or 3 weeks is not gonna. If it's a $50,000 to $100,000 difference, that's huge, right? So I would just suggest just get the right advice. Don't go with the first realtor. Interview a lot. Go with your gut feeling, who you really jive with, that genuinely cares and is going to maximize the value for you.
Best strategy, right? And really dive into what their strategy is at the end of the day.
That's right.
When it comes to selling, another topic that I just thought of as well is really that time frame, right? Because yes, selling in a month is great. Selling in a couple weeks is great. But even 6 months out is not uncommon. A year out is not uncommon when it comes to a big parcel, when it comes to a big business or a niche business. Because there's a lot of businesses out there in the agricultural world that, not a lot of people are in the market for, right? But to portray that value and have someone completely in a different world, completely different business, come in and join this business, they have to really understand how it works. That takes time. And there's a lot of accommodation that is given to those sellers.
And that being said, we have seen it where in the first week someone does bring the highest and best value. But I think if you're an agent that hasn't experienced these types of sales, it's hard for you to advise the seller that, hey, this is a good price,
Yes.
right? It's not just, this is not the good price because it's the first offer. It's the good price because, hey, we aggressively listed this and we're either getting close to or more, so we know we're above market. Take it. But and I think that comes with knowledge, expertise, and experience, right?
There's a few other points there as well. I mean, there's a lot of other factors that go hand in hand with the parcel. There's always equipment, there's always machinery,
Yes.
there's, crops, there's crop schedules,
Yeah.
and then also best case use for the parcel. Like it may not be the best case use right now, but maybe you're trying to sell it at the point of best case use for that location.
Yeah.
There might be a different purpose altogether
Yeah, that they haven't thought
that
of.
they haven't been marketing towards, right? So
Mhm.
if you just sell it at the use case that you're working with right now,
Yeah.
it's a lost opportunity, and you only get one chance at that.
Well, the thing is, like, the way I look at it, and my family, we own farms, so I get it. You've owned this asset and you've built it from the ground up. When you buy a farm, you're going to put up a house, or you're going to renovate a house. You're going to put so much time, money, effort into the farm property itself, maintenance over 20, 30, 40 years. And you should really analyze the best way to maximize the value of this property. And what is the best way is not only just putting it up, a board up for sale and seeing what happens, it's strategize and show the sellers what the avenues of a purchaser is going to come from and where is most likely going to come from, and really try to target and hit all those areas. And yes, sometimes you can do it in a week depending on the product, but sometimes it takes about 2-3 months to really get in front of all those people to make sure you've properly exposed that asset, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess circling back to the very beginning as well, when it came down to the housing and everything else, I mean, yes, of course, estate planning and everything else, that's a forced sale. It has to be done, whatever the case is. But there's a lot of like minor decisions that go in as well. And I mean, sometimes you're getting old and you don't have the time to do the landscaping anymore. The parcel's too big. There's a lot of little things as well that can make a difference, and maybe downsizing is the best play, right? At some point.
And that, I think, is always the hardest part for people that are selling farms that don't want to sell, but they know they need to sell. It's either health issues, maintenance. It just gets too much and overwhelming. I have a lot of clients in that position where they don't want to sell, but they're forced to because they're at an age where they just don't have help. It's just too much to handle, too much to manage. And they've already enjoyed their life on it, but they love it so much that they also know that when you live on this acreage, you've got this different type of lifestyle. Now, when you're moving into, say, a condo, a townhouse, a detached, and your neighbors, right, can see you come in and out all the time, right? It's a mental, it's tough. It's tough to handle for a lot of people, right?
And a lot of those people will just be like, you know what, it can go and deteriorate. It's fine. I'm staying here till the end, right? And that makes sense too. And I get it.
Yeah, we get calls all the time where people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna die on my property. I'm not selling this property."
It's morbid, but it's the reality. And I still think that's not a bad way to go at the end of the day. I mean, enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess that pretty much concludes what the real benefits of selling an agricultural property are. But I don't know, final thoughts?
Just make sure when you are thinking of selling is that you make sure you just talk to enough people, talk to your accountant, talk to some agents, talk to your family, talk to your kids, talk to everybody, and just kind of come up with a game plan. The one thing we didn't touch on that I think is very, very important: what does your next 5-10 years look like? So where are you going to go after you sell? Have you done any homework on where you want to move? Is it even living in the same city? What we've noticed, a lot of our clients are selling and they're moving to the Okanagan, and they just want a slower lifestyle, but they don't want to live in the busy city, because now every single farm here from Richmond to Chilliwack, you're minutes away from the city. So, and the traffic is more, and and then out in the Okanagan, you still have that quiet, small town lifestyle, that the reason why they bought the property to begin with. So they're all transitioning out. So really finding out what your plan is, discussing with your family what the goals are, what does your financial plan look like, what does your retirement look like, right? So these things is planning, because this comes back to planning. Plan your sale. If you can plan it years out, a year out, even better. I know everyone that is forced to sell, so either a health issue, financial issue, they always end up selling for less. Always. It's just because there's a time constraint to it. There's a time limit. There's a cap on it.
Yeah, that's the difference, right? I mean, you can be saving millions with just that little bit of foresight.
That's right.
Whereas, if you have to sell at the last second because something happened, you may not get the maximum amount, but you're going to have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, excellent. That's a great episode. It really summarizes everything.